Welcome to Joy and Gratitude. Today we are ready to have another wonderful episode. I'm Nio Queiro and my partner.
Beth Mercurio.
And, what we are trying to do here is bring awareness to a lot of things that we just don't talk about. And I spent some time this week with a very interesting behavioral health specialist. And we were focusing on women's wellness. And I got to be honest, I was mind blown.
Really?
Yeah, because the topic that she brought up was self silencing. And I looked at her curiously as what is that? And what she expressed to me that it is um, basically when you suppress your thoughts, your emotions, in the need to not bring conflict to a relationship, situation, and also to show the favorite word of 2024, demure.
Interesting. Tell me more. Demure. I love it. So it's sort of an avoidance.
Correct.
Okay.
So, with that avoidance, what psychologists have found is that as you avoid verbalizing, speaking, what happens is your body starts being impacted by it. And one of the impacts is autoimmune disease. 80% of the people that have autoimmune disease are women.
Mm.
And that's like mind-blowing. And they actually did multiple studies that link it to self-silencing. And I had to do a self-reflection, and I've done that my whole life. You know how you're in business and you're in the room and you know the right answer, you know the situation, but you don't want to cause a blow up, right? You don't want the room to blow up, so you kind of keep it to yourself. You're with your family and I don't want the conflict, so you keep it to yourself. You are juggling 100 different things. You keep it to yourself. And as a woman, what I would end up being is running this facade for so long. And then my body was shut down and I couldn't get out of bed for 3 days.
Yeah.
And I didn't
Right.
know, I had no idea what was wrong with me, but I couldn't eat. I couldn't, I couldn't do anything. I was literally in a total dead zone. And all that, from speaking to this psychologist, is all part of one of the derivatives of self-silencing.
Why do you think I'm so curious about this? Because I do think, we talk about sharing our voice and why is it that, I think it's, as we all know, relatively recent that women are feeling more and more not only comfortable, but I would say this next generation, Neo, is feeling compelled to use their voice, right? It's no longer acceptable to stay silent in ways that I think in the past we all stayed silent because we didn't want to ruffle feathers, we didn't want to be noticed, we sort of wanted to not be the one to cause a ruckus or a ruffle. But as I'm thinking about that, and I'm thinking about the number of times that I've stayed quiet when maybe it didn't feel good. So I want to talk more about that, the connection to like your body telling you you're staying quiet, but I don't like this. This doesn't feel good, right? So you're actually just shoving that into your tissue and it's staying in your tissue, right? So we can talk a little bit more about that. But the interesting part is I wonder if we all could think about a moment where we were not using our voice to support maybe somebody else that was using their voice and what that felt like. Because I know sometimes I would feel a couple of things. I'd either feel fear, like I'd feel fear, like, oh, I don't want to add on, even though I totally agree with what that woman is saying. And I should probably double down, but like, oh, I don't know, because she's really out on a limb and I don't want to be out on the limb with her. And now to think, oh, I should have jumped out on that limb, been 100% like, yes, and supported, but that fear would stop me from doing that. Even while I know I had this almost jealousy, envy, or something about her willingness to say, I don't fucking care what people think. I'm going to say what my heart really feels. And I think the evolution for all of us, and now knowing that there's actual physical ramifications to us holding back, is yeah, no, we owe it to each other to, if we actually feel something in our heart that we agree with someone, to stand by their side and say like, I agree with you, and and here's what I think, and allow that to have some momentum, rather than those people that early on were a little bit braver, a little bit more courageous, a little bit more willing to be vulnerable, to trust their heart, and we didn't jump in. At least I'll speak to myself, and I don't know, I'm hoping maybe some of the listeners
Yeah.
have moments like that.
Yeah. And the thing about it is we think that in that moment we are in self-preservation, right? We are, oh, I have to, I can't take that risk. Wow, she's strong, but I
Yeah.
can't take that risk. I need the job, or
Yeah.
I need to be liked. I finally got accepted in this group. I cannot take the risk. But reality is, every time we do that, when we are not acting on what we know is right, your body, just like you stated, the cells, the emotions stay and they keep rifling through and they start deteriorating you. So even though you did not say anything, your body is negatively processing the fact that you did not do the right thing. I mean, it's a mind blowing concept that the body rejects bad behavior on our part, even though consciously we're not doing it in a negative, connotation. But the body is saying, no, I don't like this. And I'm going to react to this. And it's going to be one higher level of exhaustion than you had 15 minutes ago. It's going to be that migraine that you did not know that you were going to get. It's going to be the aches and pains that you did not know that were coming. Your body is going to unleash somewhere that negativity that you have brought into it, whether you're aware of it or not. And what this whole concept is about is, hey, stop and be real. If you believe that, it's all about how you expressed you believe it. You may not be the flamboyant person that's up there
Yes.
making the speech, but you could be in the room and say, I agree with that, and keep it at that level, or say it in a fashion that you know the room will accept it. So it's how you frame your truth versus not giving your truth.
I it's I have so many things going through my head right now around this ability to yes, our ability, agency, and choice for how we express what we really do feel, and that we start to slow down and feel first, and then say, okay, if my body is telling me that I am, and I can picture myself because I get really energized. So if somebody's been really brave and they've said the thing that no one else is saying, I'm like, I'm animated. If people are listening and not watching right now, my hands are moving. I'm like, oh my gosh, she's saying that thing. Like, I believe that. I believe it, and I want to support her. And then that fear comes in and silences you. That's like, I love the fact that you just said it. That's exactly what happens. So I wonder if now we can help people to go, oh, wait a minute. If you're feeling a physical sensation because you are so either moved or fearful or anything about somebody using their voice in a way that you're feeling not capable of doing, that would be your moment to pause. We talk so much about exhale, power of pause, right? You don't have to react immediately. mean, you could even not say anything in that moment. You could then go support that person offline if that's your first baby step towards saying, "You know what? I really heard what you said and I just want you to know I really agree with you." You could wait and send another I love that there's opportunity. It doesn't have to be that you act in that moment, which maybe doesn't feel true to you because you're too nervous and you're scared and you feel like there's too much risk. But you can take a moment and a pause, slow down and say, "Okay, I really agree with this person. That means there's a value there. There's something inside my heart that needs to be said. How can I say it such that it's received well by this audience, that it's said without maybe all of the attached fear and emotionality that can come spewing out of you if you haven't taken that pause." And I think most importantly, one of the things I'll say that's beautiful about this is it's also practice. We keep talking, certain themes come up, right? Pause and practice. You're not going to get using your voice from a heart place, heart-centered speaking of, is not going to always come to you really easily. You have to practice doing it and then realize, "Oh, look, I'm still here. I was scared, but I did it anyway, and I'm okay, and I didn't lose my job," right? So I think there's this beauty in practicing it slowly, giving yourself permission to take baby steps to use your voice. Because I think it's really hard for us. I think you're right. We've all been conditioned, but we could use our bodies. One, now knowing that the research shows it, and we know this, that we hold a lot of our emotions in our tissues, and that causes us long term health impacts, right? That's a fact. Knowing that, maybe being like, all right, I can't keep holding this in, but allowing ourselves some freedom to figure out the ways in which we can slowly let it out so that it feels safe, that we can still belong. And maybe finding those people, truthfully, I'm thinking about that. Like when you're in a space that feels pretty safe, then using that voice feels a little bit easier, and practicing using it in a place where you feel like I'm going to be okay no matter what. And then you start to get a little bit more comfortable being like, I'm going to say stuff even when it's really uncomfortable. I don't know, how does that resonate with you? I'm just trying to think about how
No,
we can get people to play with it a little bit.
yeah, as you've been speaking, what resonates is that power of that pause.
Mm.
Because for me, after I spent that time, all I kept thinking about was there are two principles. Well, there are two things that are really inherent when there is conflict, or when there's, it doesn't have to be conflict. Sometimes it's just a situation. And our preference is usually how we react. It's our emotional self. It's our go to. But our preference isn't who we are. It's just a direct action without thinking. Using the pause gives us the ability to make the determination on how we want to express our principles. Because really that's what we're trying to do, is to own our principles. And when we hear something that, oh my gosh, she's saying what I've been thinking forever, the pause gives me the ability not to go to my comfort reaction, but to explore how to deliver my principles, my values, my beliefs, my knowledge in a way that is safe for me, but it's also digestible for my fellow person. So, my question to the audience is, first, can you identify your go to preference
Mm.
of behavior? And is that the behavior you really want to exhibit?
I love, and our body tells us whether it is or not,
Absolutely.
right? So if it's not what we want, again, you're going to either feel a little sick to your stomach, you might feel hot, you might feel a little racy, you might just want to freaking run. Like we know, fight, flight, freeze, like get the
Yeah.
heck out of that room. Like I'm uncomfortable and I'm out. all of those are little signals. And I will say, what you just said really makes me think of I took this mini course, Pima Chodron, who is an incredible ordained monk, an American ordained monk, and she does
Mhm.
some great work. And it was this course called Getting Unstuck. And there were really just three principles, and you just kind of talked about them. So I'm just going to name them here for people. The first part of getting unstuck is noticing when you're hooked. And I would say to you, noticing when you're hooked and what you just called your preference, I would say that's our, I call it your default behavior,
That's
your
right.
tendency,
That's
to either be a narrative and act a certain way, right? So
Yep.
if you know you don't like that anymore, so that's why, meaning, right, you've made a decision. I don't actually want to show up that way, either silent, not using my voice. It's just not who I want to be.
Yep.
You first notice when you're hooked. You're like, oh my God, there's that thing, default behavior happening. I'm sitting here, I'm not using my voice, or any of those behaviors, old narratives come into play. First thing is noticing you're hooked. The second thing, which is she is very open about it being the hardest thing, is to choose a new alternative.
Exactly. That's the whole thing,
S-
is choosing and knowing what is the right alternative. So you're gonna
Yes.
have to explore, and there's no right answer, people.
There's
Yeah,
right.
there's no right
Exact.
answer,
Yes. Yes.
you know?
It's like
Me
try again,
you
choose
know,
a safe space. Right. All the
I
different
I
places.
gotta be honest, I used to have anger issues. I literally would get angry so fast, I could flip on a penny. I mean, not even, people say on a dime. No, I was down to a penny. And I had anger issues. I would just get really angry. And I literally had to put a sticker on my phone that when that trigger came in, I would tap the sticker
Mm,
and it would bring me down, and then I could find my consciousness again. I'm not saying that's the answer, but what I'm saying is, who do you want to show up as? You're going to have to figure it out. You're going to have to
yeah.
play, but that's the
Yes,
best part of it because you're
it
going to
is.
find out what makes you, not anybody else, be able to move past that default, that
Yeah.
preference behavior.
I love that you gave an example, because I think that to get from, your being hooked to a new alternative, that's where the pause comes in. So when we talk about a pause, it's creating that space to identify possible alternatives, right? So when you're tapping your phone, and for those that are listening, I have a phone, Neo did too. We're touching our phones, we're like literally showing people what she was doing, that there's a whole bunch of different possibilities. So when we say play, the cool part about that is there's not one answer. It's like, what are the potential ways that you could create new alternatives to your default behavior? And sometimes that could take a day. You might have a default behavior where you're going to react to somebody. And Neo just was open with us about her anger issues. I mean, acting in reactivity and in anger, probably not how she wants to show up. If she creates her tapping, or maybe says, I'm not going to respond, I mean, just choosing to not respond to somebody for a certain amount of time, and then really being thoughtful in how you're going to respond, that's a new alternative
That's
versus
right.
reacting, right?
Yep. Yep.
And I will say to you, the third step, just to return us to Pima's three steps, the third step is it's a lifelong journey. So it never ends. It's never like, oh, good, I figured out my default behavior and now I act differently. Nope. The fact is, it's going to keep showing up. And even when you maybe think, oh, I've moved and I've shifted, it still comes up. Somebody can still trigger you. Some situation can still put you in that place where you've defaulted to that behavior. So the goal is actually that over time in your lifetime, the time that it takes for you to get hooked and choose a new alternative just gets shorter.
Yeah.
It's not that it doesn't happen. It's just that you go, "Oh my god, there's that thing. My body is like freaking out and I'm really uncomfortable right now and I don't want to be here," or whatever that looks like for you. That's your moment where you're like, "I am completely hooked and I now need to do something different." And yeah, I love, maybe this is like a lovely challenge for our listeners, Neo, is
It
do
really
people
is.
know what hooks them?
Yeah.
Right?
And being honest about it. Um, And the beauty of all this is if you're not at the point that you can have a conversation with someone or have a safe place to have this conversation, the fact of the matter is you own this conversation with yourself.
Mhm.
So talk to
I
your
love that. I love that.
because
Yeah, maybe
sometimes
you're not ready.
maybe you're not
Yes.
ready to have a conversation, but this is something that you could say, you know, I had anger issues when I was in my 30s, and I have moved way past those. Don't get me wrong. There's still those days that y'all gonna make me lose my mind up in here, up in here. So it exists. It never goes away. But I know how to handle it.
Mhm.
I recognize it before it becomes reckless.
I
And
love it.
and that's the whole game, right? But that meant that this is the first time I ever said I had anger issues. But I talked
Right
to
now? Right
yeah,
now?
this is the first time
Woo!
I've ever told people I had anger issues. But I
Amazing.
definitely told my 35-year-old self while I was going through it, "You have some issues,
Mm.
girl. What got you here?"
Yes.
And I had that conversation that I owed myself with myself, and I started the journey then. So
Well,
it's never too late to start the journey, but it is the best thing that you could do for yourself because you know who you want to be and you can feel good if you're willing to explore, be curious about who you are.
okay. I have so many things swirling in my head, but first, I just wanna say thank you for sharing that with us, for naming something that was really an issue for you, and feeling like sharing that with our community and our listeners will help someone because it will, because we've all got those things. So I just feel really honored that that came out in such a beautiful and natural way. And I hope we just continue to do that. We've talked about authenticity in this podcast being one of our number one values. So I just want to name that that's beautiful. So thank you.
Thank
And you really did bring us back to the most important thing. So again, when I questioned, "Hey listeners, what gets you hooked?" I think you nailed it. Actually, the very first pause is with yourself. And I'm having a memory. I can picture myself because again, this all goes back to what we talked about in the beginning, our somas, our physical human bodies, holding our emotionality and leading to longer term health impacts, right? That's how we started this conversation.
That's right.
If we think about it, your body lets you know. So I actually have really, you're just reminding me, you took me back to when did I start to first notice where I got hooked. And it's true. Like my husband would say something and I would literally be so frustrated. And it was like, I mean, my blood would be boiling and I would be like, "How can you even say that? How can you be that insensitive? I can't even believe those words came out of your mouth." And initially, I would say all those things. I would start screaming. I would
Mhm.
say exactly what I was feeling, and
Yep.
it ended up then creating a massive blowout, right? A fight, like not why are you yelling at me? And so honestly, I love that you just reminded us that the first step was when I realized I don't actually want to yell at him, to be like this. I don't want a relationship like this. Like, what is going on? So, in the moments where my blood would boil, and I still would think, that's super insensitive, and I can't believe it just came out of your mouth, I would walk out of the room. I'd say, I need a moment. I need to take a little space. And I would go often into our bedroom and I would just be like, why am I so upset? Why is my blood boiling right now? And I'd have to figure out like what part of that did I own? Was it that I was feeling unworthy and I was just like, I can't believe he doesn't see me. I don't feel seen by him. I can't believe that he didn't see that I was upset. Whatever it was, then once I could identify that that was me, that I owned part of the lash out, I could go back in a real conversation and share. That's the new alternative. You know what? When you said that, I'm sure it wasn't your intent, but the impact you had was that like you made me feel like I didn't matter. And when I feel like I don't matter, I go back to my all the tissues, all the things that come up about we all as human beings want to belong. So when I once I feel like I don't belong or I don't have self dignity, then the anger is coming at you in a whole nother level. And so I just have that very specific memory come to me about the times where I had to remove myself to figure out why I had blood curdling, activity in my body. So I think you're right. The first step is when you feel agitated, dysregulated, upset, all of those things, like the pause is for you to go have a conversation with yourself and to
Absolutely.
start realizing, why am I so upset? Because it's not always the other person. There's stuff we own. I love that, Neo. That to me is the big aha of this. How do we start to notice when our bodies are telling us that we're either not being true to our values or something around our dignity, belonging, self worth is being impacted so that we can actually do something different instead of just letting it build up and stay in our bodies and
Yeah.
end up having impact?
So, as we've gone through this journey of really understanding how we self silence, how we need to get unstuck, we need to figure out our reaction and our pause, have that conversation with ourselves, and then start healing by finding our voice. All that is part of our self awareness and who we are. And I've loved the fact that we've had this conversation. And at this point, I want to share with our listeners my two songs that are the playlists that I think really resonate with me as we thought of this topic. The first one is Hold Your Head Up High by Darlingside. And this is
Mm.
a beautiful instrumental that comes into your soul and lets you have a moment of pure reflection. And it lets you know that through it all, keep your head up high because you're doing your best. And the second is At Your Best, You Are Love by Aaliyah.
Mm.
So, two different genres, a little hip hop, but man, that song, it literally brings calm and peace to your heart because you are the best.
Oh, Neo, I always love this part of our podcast because I learn these songs. I don't know these songs. So sometimes when you name them, I get to go off and listen and really have them resonate. So I now will do Gratitude Rock. So for those of
Yes.
you listening, I have my bag. See, you can hear it as I jumble around all of the different Gratitude Rocks. I'm going to reach in. Let's see what we have for us today. So the word is open. And again, we're always blown away by what words are come up. I think it's really clear that this whole conversation is about how can we open our hearts and open our tissues and our bodies to be more aware of what we are silencing ourselves around. Like, what are the areas where we're hooked, and there's more going on that we need to really tune into. So let's be open to ourselves first, and let's be open to understanding our own body, mind, and heart, so that we can then bring that to a better place and share it with the world.
As we entangle ourselves with joy and gratitude, we look forward to our next chapter.